Well, howdy, Spiceheads. Welcome back to a brand new episode of On the Air, the show that's all about getting IT pros and tech vendors together to geek out over technology. As always, I'm your host, Justin Ong. We got another great show for you guys today. We're going to be talking all about navigating that trail to the promised land of Office 365 and how to avoid getting snake bitten along the way. So for more on this, we've got a great panel of experts for you guys today, including an IT pro from the Spiceworks community, as well as some experts from SHI and Microsoft. So without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce our panel so you can say hi to them. Batting first, he is a long-standing member in the Spiceworks community, local here to Austin. First time, not his first time being on the air, but first time with me as a host. So I'm excited to have him on, Mr. Chris Dubé. Chris, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thank you. I'm doing good.
Chris, how's it going? Welcome. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you guys do?
I supervise a help desk at UT System Administration here in Austin. We have about 1,000 users. We're responsible for the administration of all the UT campuses across the state. And I'm here today because we just finished up O365 migration.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Well, can't wait to hear all about your experiences and look to your advice for this upcoming show. Our next panelist comes to us from the North Carolina area. She's representing SHI as the Director of Cloud Strategy for Corporate Division, Ms. Audrey Blair. Audrey, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Audrey, can you tell us about yourself and what you do for SHI?
Sure. So I've been in the technology world at 20 plus years, stop counting at 20. And so I have a team that's called the Cloud Climb team, and we specifically help customers as they're transitioning to the cloud, their transition, helping them with their strategy and the journey along the way.
All right, wonderful. Thanks for joining us as well,
Thank
Audrey.
you.
Our next panelist is Microsoft Solution Specialist for SHI, which I believe more or less translates to licensing dude. Would you say that's about fair?
Yeah, definitely.
Mr. Drew Leonard. Drew, how's it going today?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
Drew, do you mind telling us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so again, my role is Solution Specialist for Microsoft at SHI. So that means really just designing Microsoft solutions for our customers. Everything from new product evaluation to the licensing side of that and how to transition there. And then everything from the deployment to the adoption of the products themselves.
Okay. So you're engaged through the start of the project all the way through the completion.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Cool. All right. And last but not least, representing Microsoft, Mr. Scott Williams. Scott, welcome.
Thanks, Justin. Good morning.
Scott, can you tell us about yourself and what you do for Microsoft?
Yeah, sure. I've been with Microsoft for about 6 years now, and I'm an Office 365 and Enterprise Mobility Suite solutions specialist. I work on the pre-sales side, and I'm fully dedicated to the SHI sales team. And I work with the sellers at SHI and the licensing executives to help their customers really understand the options that are available for Office 365 and help them navigate the proper solution for them when they're moving workloads to the cloud.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for joining us as well, Scott. Looking forward to hearing from you. But of course, what would On the Air be without you guys, the viewers? So for more on that, we're going to kick things back over to our favorite chat desk correspondent, Chelsea. Chelsea, what's going on?
Hello, hello, hello. Long time no see. Thank you, Justin. Yes, it is me, Chelsea. I am your chat desk host today and for always. Per the usual, you have questions and we have answers. So be sure to get those questions into that Q&A widget. And if we ask your question live on the air, you'll be in the running for some super cool swag from SHI and Microsoft. Do y'all want to know what the swag is today?
Heck yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Today, SHI and Microsoft are hooking you up with these super duper insulated tumblers. As you can see, they are gigantic. They should certainly be able to keep a beverage nice and cold for a very long period of time,
Or hot.
as well. Thank you, Justin.
Yes.
I was getting to that.
Oh, sorry.
As well as keep it hot for a very long period of time. So you can go either way. Lukewarm, I'm afraid, is something you're going to have to, you have to pour it in lukewarm if you want it to stay lukewarm. And then our grand prize, which is going out to one very lucky attendee of today's show, is our Nintendo NES. Yes. So you can get your old school game on. You'll have to use your thumbs for this. I know that there are a lot of PC gamers out there, woot woot. But yeah, you're gonna have tons of fun playing Super Nintendo?
No, it's regular
Super?
Nintendo. Yeah.
I mean, not Super. I keep saying Super, but it's not Super. I mean, it's super cool, but I'm talking about Mario and Zelda. And what was your favorite game, Chris?
Solomon's Key.
Solomon's Key.
Digging deep, as Justin would say. So tons of fun games, tons of fun old school things that you could do. And speaking of old school games, today's segment, we're introducing a very new segment today called Office Trail. It's based on everyone's favorite childhood game of fun and adventure, Oregon Trail. So you'll just have to stick around to find out what we have in store for you. Justin, There will be no snake bites.
We can't promise that, Chelsea.
Okay, well, I'm hoping that there will be no snake bites. But stick around for Office Trail. It's our take on Oregon Trail. And that's really all that I got. I mean, we got prizes, we got tumblers, we got Oregon Trail. What more could you want? Besides a great conversation.
Exactly.
So Justin.
Everyone's a winner. Chelsea, what is your favorite NES game, or were you like PC for life?
No. I started out on Nintendo. I definitely like Zelda, Duck Hunt. Well, I can't remember if that was super or regular.
No, that's
Sorry.
regular. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I did play a lot of SNES. So like Donkey Kong, all the Super Mario games. Why do I keep saying that? Yeah. So that was where I started my gaming career. But also Oregon Trail. That I did play that as well. So. All the things, I like to play all the things.
It's just nostalgia day here on Spice, on the air. All right, well, thank you guys. Make sure to get all those questions into Q&A. We'll be taking your questions later on the show, and good luck to all y'all winning that NES. Now Chelsea's got me started on it, and can't wait to find out who's going home with that. So let's go ahead and get started into it. All right, so Chris, we'll start with you. You just recently completed your journey to Office 365. How similar would you say it was to something like the settlers who were moving over to Oregon and, dealing with all the surprises on the way?
It's pretty similar. I mean, it's a big move.
Yeah.
It's not a little thing. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of preparation. And if you don't do either of those things, you're going to get snake bit.
Hey, no snake biting on this show.
And then so for you guys, we'll start with Scott. As far as kind of understanding, I think a lot of folks that are watching today are going to be a lot like Chris, which is like, it's this long, complicated journey. You wish that you knew all the stuff that was going to surprise you along the way. And that's why it's important to kind of prepare as much as you can up front. What are some of the questions that you go into your discussions with customers on things that they kind of need to know up front about how they want their Office 365 deployment to look like before they begin?
Sure. So the primary thing is what workloads are they moving to the cloud? With Office 365, you have a lot of different options, whether you want to move Exchange first or SharePoint first. You really have to have a plan about what's going to the cloud and what your timeline is for going to be doing that. Then, of course, you want to do some planning around moving those workloads to the cloud and choose your migration path. There's also several paths to get to the cloud. So we want to make sure that, depending on the size of the customer and the amount of data that they're moving to the cloud, that they're choosing the correct migration path when they do choose to make that jump.
And Drew, from a licensing perspective, I think another big fear a lot of folks have is, I don't know how my licensing is going to translate to an Office 365 if I have on-premises licenses for SharePoint, Exchange, Office, how that all kind of correlates over to it. But how, what can you tell folks, like how simple is it usually, and are there kind of edge cases that folks would want to know, should know about?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of it really depends on what a customer's licensed for today. If it's a net new customer to Microsoft, or if it's an existing perpetual license type customer who's doing everything on premise, and really also where they are in their contract as well. So if they have an annual commitment, or if they're just buying things kind of on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis. So there's a lot of things to look out for. It's really important to have a partnership with a licensing partner who can help walk you through those, because I tell customers all the time, you almost need a separate degree to understand Microsoft licensing. So whether it's an add-on, a full subscription, taking advantage of the investment that you've already made by using from software assurance SKUs from Microsoft, there's a lot of different ways to attack that. And so that planning and preparation is really, really important.
Audrey, what about you? You guys focus more on the actual user adoption and user training elements of it. But from a planning perspective, what kind of advice do you typically give customers as far as how to approach an Office 365?
Sure, and the user adoption doesn't start after deployment, it actually starts during the planning phase. And so when you're talking about and thinking about the workloads, you want to think about what is driving the move. It could be pain points, it could be business initiatives to Office 365. And so understanding, considering the business scenarios for your specific organization is what's going to help you to determine what that path is going to be.
And Chris, let's talk more about your specific experience. So you guys actually did SharePoint first instead of Exchange. Can you talk a little bit about how that was and why you guys went that way?
We're heavily vested into SharePoint for the good and the bad. So we decided to go that way first. That way it'll get us into the cloud, and it's one of our biggest tools, so that's why we decided to do that. and then follow that up with our Exchange migration. And then probably within the next year, we're going to do Azure for our AD.
Okay.
So SharePoint was fairly easy because it's kind of self-contained, and Exchange was, I don't want to say a nightmare, but there's a lot more involved with that than with SharePoint.
And I think that's interesting because, I mean, would you guys see, Scott, you'd say most of the time people do Exchange first as kind of
Absolutely, yeah. Email is the one thing that most customers want to get to the cloud for the reliability factor. But certainly a lot of customers are heavily dependent on SharePoint as well. So that's really one of the things we talk to about the customers to really determine what is their primary workload. What do you want to get to the cloud first? And then we kind of work with the customer to put a plan together to not only get their Exchange or SharePoint environment up to the cloud, as quickly as we can, but also to move SharePoint and any other data that they've got on their timeline that they're looking to move on.
And so, Chris, you guys went SharePoint first, and then Exchange actually ended up being more complicated. Was that from a planning and organizational perspective, or just the way the data had kind of evolved?
I think it's a combination of both. There were a lot of issues that we didn't foresee, that we didn't think about, and so that kind of made it a little bit more difficult as opposed to SharePoint. But yeah, it's like she was saying, it's not just the IT side for the migration, it's also the user side. And so having a better plan to get the user involved and knowing what's coming instead of just them going to work, going home on a Friday and then coming in on a Monday and having a completely new experience. That probably isn't the best way to go.
And then so you guys, in order to facilitate your initial SharePoint and Exchange, you actually went through, you're not in AD for Azure yet, so that means you're in ADFS right now?
Yeah.
And what was the reason for doing ADFS instead of Azure and Active Directory? Or Active Directory and Azure?
We have one main tree for our Active Directory, and it's tied to a lot of external users. And so we didn't know at the time if we were even going to go to Azure. We were thinking that maybe we would just keep Active Directory on-prem.
Okay.
But we decided after the Exchange migration that it would tie in a lot better if we went to Azure and got everything up in the cloud instead of having the kind of piecemeal back and forth with a hybrid. And that's why we made the decision to do that last.
Drew and Scott, can you guys talk more about the decision between AD and Azure and ADFS? What are you guys seeing out of the customers that you guys work with? Is one still more common than the other?
Yeah, for cloud users, certainly Azure Active Directory is the way to go, and all your Office 365 subscriptions include Azure Active Directory, so that makes it easy for customers when they're moving to get those users set up in Azure Active Directory. And we also have a connector called Azure AD Connect, which actually integrates those two systems together. And Azure AD Connect gives you several different synchronization options, from ADFS to synchronized passwords, or even pass-through synchronization for passwords. So that's one thing we want to talk to customers about as well when they're in the planning phase, to determine what directory do you want to use, because Azure Active Directory will integrate with any LDAP directory essentially, as well as Active Directory. And then determine what type of synchronization and authentication they want to set up for the users as well.
Yeah, and I think to that point too, that it really depends on what the customer is trying to do with Azure and Active Directory, because there are a couple different licensing options that you have as well. You have an Azure AD Premium plan where you can do multi-factor authentication, self-service password reset, different things like that. So a lot of it is what's the product that the customers purchase and what are they really trying to accomplish in Azure with their AD.
And you can take a phased approach to that as well. You don't have to know, you do need to plan well, but you can phase that in. You don't have to start immediately with ADFS. So there's a couple of different ways to go on that journey.
And Scott and Drew, I wanted to ask both you as well, and Audrey as well. I mean, as far as, I think Chris is in a unique position because he knew from the gates, like we're using SharePoint already. We know we want to go that route. We want to go to Exchange after that, and then we'll kind of take things from there. Based on the conversations that I have, most people, like you'd mentioned, are looking to get Exchange now. But for them, Office 365 is more like Amazon Prime, where you're just paying one thing and you actually get all this other stuff as well. How do you guys help customers that maybe are only familiar with Exchange, maybe feel like they might want SharePoint and OneDrive, have no idea what to do with things like Delve? You know, how do you kind of recommend customers kind of get educated on
It's a
that?
big well, part of my role is to help educate customers on exactly what's available in Office 365 and the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. You know, there's a lot of products rolling out, and Microsoft loves to keep us on our toes and roll out new applications and products all the time. So a big part of my role is to help educate customers around those new workloads and those new applications that are coming out, to help them understand how things like Delve or Yammer or Flow or Power Apps can benefit their organization and help make a lot of their processes a lot more efficient than they're probably doing today.
Yeah, and Audrey's team has a really incredible program for that. But another thing that we do is called Immersion Labs. So the customer gets to go in and actually use the licenses themselves for Office 365 and products like EMS and Azure, so that they can understand what questions to ask and see those tiles and the products that they get within that suite and start to understand everything that it comes with, so that they can actually go out and use that and put together a plan to adopt it and use the products.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about is you can't develop a strategy when you don't know what you have to work with. And so we do a workshop, both one-on-one and an on-demand workshop, where it's called Unpacking Office 365. And it literally goes through all the components, the base components that customers have available to them in Office 365, help them to understand what it is, example use cases, some FAQs that we get around those things, and then they can start thinking about, okay, wow, and even thinking about SharePoint on-prem to SharePoint in the cloud, it's not necessarily always a like for like, because some of the things you're doing on premises, you can do differently and sometimes even more efficiently than in the cloud as well, with things like Teams and Office 365 groups. So having those kinds of conversations and helping them to understand what they have to work with, then we can start talking about strategy.
Chris, I want to ask you next about the people element of the migration. Let's start first with your own internal IT staff. Like, can you talk us through? You guys have been kind of immersed in SharePoint for a while, obviously, as you guys using Exchange. When it came to Office 365, how much time and preparation did you and your team put into personally, kind of preparing your guys as a department for what was ahead?
We had probably, I want to say, a good 6 months out from the actual start of the migration, where we did a lot of Googling YouTube videos, reaching out for partner training.
I think you mean Bing, right, Scott?
Binging.
Binging. And so, yeah, we did a lot of self-training. We had more organized training as a group, things like that. We have a business analyst that works with us that works a lot directly with Microsoft a lot. And so he gave us a lot of material for just the general use. And the IT team was actually migrated early as a kind of a test group. And so we got to use it firsthand to kind of get a knowledge, familiar with the product before we actually started the migration. Because I know we were going to have a lot of questions from the users. And so that helped.
Okay, cool. Audrey, as far as IT preparation, what are the things that you guys recommend?
Well, certainly with IT, don't forget about, it's not just an IT. With Office 365, it's just not IT ownership. It's also, you got to bring in the business side of things. So IT needs to understand how those users are going to be using it. They need to understand who the business owners are, who the success managers are. And then as a fan of IT, what they should do is also reach out, try and figure out how to build a champion program within the organization as well, because they're going to be that tier one help for the day-to-day end users. So thinking through, again, just, the deployment beyond and how the users are actually going to be using it. So pulling those resources in early to help having a full and rounded conversation.
And Chris, what was the user experience like for you? I know you guys are kind of lucky. You've got a dedicated business analyst to really deal with a lot of those user issues up front. Did you guys still have any kind of, clearly not bad, but medium scale miscommunications or misunderstandings with users about what it was going to be like or what things were like afterwards?
Yeah, a lot of our users, they get set in their ways. They don't like change. And this is a fairly big change. We still let them use Outlook, installed Outlook. even though we prefer them to use the web-based, it's just a lot better. We had a lot of issues with users on cell phones, mobile devices that have their email accounts and stuff set up through that. And once that migration happened, it kind of broke that, and they have to redo it on their phone. And that was a headache for a lot of users because we didn't know that it was going to break. And so them coming in ready for work and then not getting email on their mobile devices was a huge hassle. And then, like I said, looking back on it, the doing it a small group of users at a time, in theory that probably looked good, but in practice it wasn't the best for us because we have a lot of users that share content through their calendar and have access to mailboxes, shared mailboxes. And if that whole group is not migrated, then it breaks that connection. And so we had a lot of that issue that we didn't even think about beforehand. Had we gone with a third party, we might have alleviated some of those headaches. But doing it yourself for a large organization, I don't recommend that.
And Audrey, what can you tell us about kind of managing the herd of people after the migration? It's not. It seems like a lot of organizations just make people sit through a lunch and learn, and here's your PowerPoint presentation, and now you're trained. Go on and use Office 365.
Yeah, nothing against lunch and learns, right? Most people just show up for the lunch. I'm not sure how much learning is happening, although it can, but that is one small aspect of it. So you need a long-term training plan. You need something, because Office 365 is changing so much. You look at the roadmap, there's so much that's coming. So you need something that's going to be ongoing, get your users comfortable with it, and so that they can continue learning and really help to drive the efficiency. So they need to understand the why, they need to understand how, and then on the IT and kind of the leadership of the organization, what are the policies? How do you expect us to use these things, and what are we supposed to be doing? And so that way there's a level of comfortability and kind of break down some of those barriers to and the resistance to change that end users typically have.
Okay. And obviously there's a million different ways that we can kind of apply some of these practices we've been talking about, but I'm curious how, because you guys at SHI have a specific kind of delivery process that you guys have had around that you've had a lot of success with. Can you kind of talk us through exactly what was included in that?
Sure. So our Cloud Climb program, we very specifically work with customers as they are making that transition. So we walk them through and talk about their strategy, all the things that I've already mentioned. And then we have a couple of applications that are very, very useful. So when you move to Office 365, from the end user's perspective, now that you have your content, when you go to the traditional portal for Office 365, it's basically an app launcher. And it doesn't answer the question, where's my stuff? How do I find my documents? Where is everything now? So we have what's called the start screen for Office 365. And it's essentially a dashboard that helps, very personalized for that end user, helps them define their content within Office 365. And then for the IT pro, we have what's called our Cloud Climb Basecamp. And here we've curated a lot of content from Microsoft, and we've created content from on-demand webinars and things that we've done with our customers to help them around developing that strategy. We have journeys and how-tos very specifically to walk them through various steps within Office 365. So it's a little bit of a training, getting them used to what they need to be doing, and again, helping to bring the comfortability with Office 365. And so that's really been very successful for our customers to help them not only with getting to the cloud, but then helping them with their end user adoption and consumption.
Okay, cool. And one of the last topics we'll cover before we go to questions is just this idea that, like, and actually this came up as a question in the community yesterday when I was trying to promote the show, is around the fact that Microsoft constantly, again, Amazon Prime, they're adding new stuff all the time. Chris, how do you guys as an organization stay up to date as to all the changes with all the apps and all the new services that are being added?
Our business analyst.
Okay, so you have a dedicated guy.
Yeah, that's his full-time job, is to see what's out there and what's coming and how it will affect us. And he kind of sends out informational emails about, hey, Skype for Business is now becoming Teams. So we're kind of, we don't have to spend as much time ourselves looking at these things. That's what his job is.
And Scott, for people who don't have a dedicated Microsoft follower,
Which is those folks.
how else, what are some of the best resources or best ways to stay up on top of it?
Well, Microsoft makes it easy for our customers to really stay on top of all the changes in Office 365. Every Office 365 subscription comes with an admin center for the admins, And within that admin center, we're providing updates on what's coming down the road in Office 365 so the admins can be prepared for that and plan accordingly. We also have lots of online resources that are available for our customers, like the Microsoft Virtual Academy that educates our customers around the new features that are coming out in Office 365. And there's lots of great video content out there on some of the YouTube and other platforms that keep our customers up to date on what's happening in the previous month and what's coming down the road in Office 365. So several different ways we're educating, but it also pays to work with a good partner to help with that education process as well. And that's one thing that we at SHI do. We talk to customers all the time who have deployed to Office 365, but they're seeing new products in their portal now, and they just got questions around what is this, how do we use this? So that's where we come in and we can kind of provide some education for the customers on that side as well.
Drew or Audrey, how do you guys, any recommendations from you guys?
Yeah, I'd say the partnership is really, really key. So putting a structure to it is great, because a lot of times customers will forget and they're really dealing with their own set of problems, whereas us as a partner are here to help, and we have a good pulse on the industry and a pulse on what Microsoft is doing. One of the things too is we're technically trained to help out these customers as well. So instead of just going on and looking up specific videos, we can look at your customers' licenses and say, hey, this is how this is actually going to affect you guys, not just what the change happened, but here, let's sit down and have a review on how this is going to impact your organization, kind of what you need to keep in mind when you're debating between specific products or licensing vehicles. So.
Sure. And we have a Cloud Climb newsletter that goes out to our customers, and so just to kind of keep them abreast of what's going on, and new content that we put inside of our portal as well to keep up with all of that. So.
All right, cool. Well, guys, before we go any further, I understand we got a ton of questions coming in from the audience, so let's kick it on over to Chelsea and find out what folks want to know.
Thanks, Justin. We do have a ton of questions, and I'd like to jump right in. Our first question is coming out from Percussive Maintenance. Percussive wants to know, if I were to migrate to Office 365, can I partially migrate, i.e. on-prem AD with Office 365?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You can have a hybrid scenario, absolutely.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of the Office 365 enterprise plans, there's two tiers in Office 365. There's a business tier and an enterprise tier. With the enterprise tier, you actually get what's called dual use rights, which allows customers to run in a hybrid deployment scenario for as long as they need to. A lot of customers do choose to keep Exchange servers on-prem while they move some users to the cloud, so that those enterprise licenses give users and customers the ability to maintain that hybrid environment for as long as they need to.
All right, cool.
Sounds
Let's
good.
get another one.
This next one is in from Sean. Sean wants to know, what is the overall RTO on managing an O365 rollout versus traditional on-prem?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that exactly, but I think you have to look at it in the long run. So after about, I would say initially up front, I think after about 3 years is when you're going to start getting the return on those dollars. And a lot of it does depend on what you're actually utilizing in Office 365. So Microsoft considers optimization in Office 365 when you've rolled out at least 3 of the components and you've got at least 40 to 50% active use on those components. So at that point, you're starting to see the efficiency and you're starting to get a return on those investment dollars. So.
And this is the question we get a lot, because this is obviously how bosses who don't understand technology are going to be able to weigh a decision like whether they should move to Office 365. So for all you guys, and Chris too, how often do you guys have these conversations and it's just around dollars and cents versus do you weigh other softer factors like productivity and other things like that?
Absolutely.
Productivity is a huge one, but it's also, I mean, you no longer have to maintain a server, so you don't have a server to upgrade. You don't have to worry about buying new storage as user mailboxes increase. You don't have to worry about having disaster backup. You don't have to have an off-site data center anymore that you have to maintain. You're not going to get a phone call at 3 a.m. because power went out. So that's a huge return of an investment, because that's money that you're not spending out anymore.
Yeah, and I would say from a licensing standpoint, I see a lot of customers come up for renewal that have Office 365 licenses, and if there's ever an issue as to we don't want to necessarily renew these, we want to go back to the old model, 99% of the time it's because of the consumption piece of that. And they've only migrated part of Exchange or only migrated a little bit of piece, and so they haven't actually fully used the full Office 365 suite. So consuming that and adopting it is really, really key in finding those ROI dollars.
Yep.
Cool. All right, Chelsea, let's get another question.
All right, this one is in from Trent the Gent. Trent wants to know, everywhere I've worked with Office 365 only has a one-way sync. Is there a way to do a two-way sync between it and AD?
Yes. Yeah, so when Azure Active Directory, like I mentioned, we do have the Azure AD Connect tool, which does provide bidirectional synchronization. Now, you would have to purchase an Azure Active Directory Premium license, which provides that two-way synchronization, and that's typically going to be an add-on to Office 365 licenses. Like I mentioned earlier, you do get a subscription to Azure Active Directory, but we do offer lots of enhanced capabilities to Azure Active Directory Premium, bidirectional synchronization being one of those. You also get single sign-on, multi-factor authentication for thousands of applications. So absolutely, yes, that's something that's definitely available.
Okay. Let's get some more questions.
More. Angie and Percussive Maintenance are hitting us hard, but I'm going to go to one of Angie's questions now. Angie wants to know, do you have the automatic user provisioning capability that would allow me to create custom mappings based on Active Directory groups, as well as define role-based access to Office 365?
And side question, how much is Teams incorporated into like policy based? I guess maybe that's her question, right? She's got all these mappings in Active
Right.
Directory. How does that then translate to Office 365 permissions, and is Teams part of this equation at all?
It's not really a like for like. It's not quite the same.
Yeah.
We'd have to dig into that a little bit more to be able to get a specific answer to that question. But yeah.
Well, I think, again, based on my understanding of it, like that was it seems to be a common situation, because like IT pros are
Right.
they're used to Active Directory as kind of the end all be all.
The dynamic.
Yeah,
Yes.
as far as managing users and groups and trees and all that kind of stuff. And now I introduced things like SharePoint and now Teams as a way to undo that, but it's also different.
Well, it's different.
Can you clarify that at all?
So it's different because, all right, so if you look at kind of your standard DL, so your standard kind of distribution
Yeah.
list, it's a team. So it depends on what the use of that DL is in your Active Directory. If it really is specifically just, hey, we're just sending emails here, there's not any collaboration, we're not doing anything more than just that, you don't need to then create or translate that to an Office 365 group, and you don't need to do anything else, and you can keep it as a DL. But in terms of having kind of the dynamic, because when you move your licenses and you have your users in Office 365, you can create some groups. It's not exactly the same as what you're doing on premises, and so you have to kind of rethink that a little bit. And yes, you do utilize Teams, but again, how and why is that team created? Is it truly a collaboration team? Because when you have an Office 365 group or Microsoft Teams, you have so much more than just a mailbox.
Yeah.
You have a document library, you have a SharePoint team site on the back end, you have a collaboration space, whether that's email driven or whether that's chat based. And so understanding what those groups are and the dynamics of those groups is what's going to determine how you're going to map those out.
So to kind of answer Angie's question, it's like there are ways to map directly, but it's a big chance it's not actually what you want.
Right.
Yes. Chris, can you talk about like what you guys ended up doing?
So we have a lot of distribution groups that are just true distribution groups. It's an email address that you email. A few people get that email, and that's all they need. And then some people were using a distribution group but doing a little bit more collaboration. And so Teams would have fit them better than just a straight up group. And then SharePoint, some departments use it as just a document repository. It's where they keep all their stuff online. And then other departments use it as a huge collaboration tool where they're working with outside vendors, people at other institutions, and they're doing the back and forth. And so you just have to basically look at what people are using and then what is available, and then try to map that together on what would suit the end user better, because there's so many tools out there now.
Chelsea, can we get another question?
Sure thing. This one really can be answered by everyone on the panel. Percussive maintenance has another great question, and PM wants to know, what do you think has been your biggest learning curve when moving to the cloud? And Spicehead Mitsal points out that Chris mentioned you had some issues. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the top issues that impacted your migration schedule?
I would say the two biggest things that happened to our migration is as soon as we migrated users, their cell phones for their email client on their phone, if they were using the built-in mail client, it broke. So they had to basically redo their mail account to get that. iPhone users, they were patched where they couldn't add email through the app, so they have to actually download the Outlook app from the App Store to get the email to work. And then the other big issue, since we did it group by group, is that the people who were collaborating with each other that have access to shared mailboxes or like admins that have permissions on their executives' calendars, if both people weren't migrated, then they couldn't do that anymore. And then another minor issue that it was more of a headache than an issue is for the distribution groups, if someone is an owner of a distribution group and that distribution group was still on-prem, but their account was migrated, even though they're an owner of the distribution group, they can't edit that distribution group. And so those are the things that we didn't even think about before the migration that kind of bit us after the migration.
Any other learning curves that you see, organizations needing to kind of hurdle before achieving success?
I think, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, remediation, like getting your data, getting your content cleaned up. Nobody wants to do it, but getting things cleaned up before the move. It's like when you're moving houses, you want to throw the junk out before. You don't want to take all your junk.
A drawer full of pencils.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That's most Active Directories are jar. I mean, ours is decades old and it's just a mess. So clean up your Active Directory, clean up your Exchange servers before you even start to migrate.
I would say the focus of attention on the planning side of it too is huge. It's really tempting to go and jump to a product that you think you want, but the planning is by far the most important part of that too. So definitely plan.
We've had lots of conversations where customers go, well, we want this, and when we talk about, well, how are we going to use that? And we go, that's not what you need at all. You need this. So,
All right, let's keep on going, Chelsea.
Great. We've got a question from Shelby. Shelby wants to know, how have you worked with staff to embrace the cloud? Do you have staff that still save their documents locally until their computer crashes and they lose it all?
That's a good question.
that's a great question. And we do actually get similar questions to that a lot, and where there's that resistance to change. And a lot of it depends on the organization. So, do you have policies around these things? And a lot of times we encourage customers to have policies and say, look, at a certain point in time, your documents need to be in this place. The other thing is understanding the pain points. Why are those users resistant? And one of the things I talked about, having a champion program, don't only get those who are ready to move to the cloud. Try and get some naysayers, because if you can turn a naysayer into a champion, that's very, very powerful for the organization. So understanding what those fears are, why they're afraid, helping them understand the hows and the whys, and then that helps to bring down that resistance. Because when the end users are not included in that conversation, they just feel left out and they just don't understand. So that's probably the biggest thing that has been helpful.
In this particular case, I mean, do you guys still recommend just mapping their either OneDrive or SharePoint document libraries to their file?
That's best practice.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, we have mappings for on-site backup storage that gets backed up every couple of hours. We have OneDrive now. We have unlimited space with OneDrive.
And you can map that.
You can share stuff with people outside your organization. It's easy, it's quick. And we still have people that save stuff locally. And once every few months, someone comes in, they get a virus, their hard drive crashes, and they're like, well, where's my last 6 months of work? And I'm like, and they think as an IT pro that, you can just
Aren't you a
get that
wizard?
back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no.
Can't you bring things back from the dead?
And so, it's the best practice to not do that.
All right, Chelsea, let's keep on going.
Okay, we have another great one from Percussive Maintenance. PM, you are the best. I love all your questions today. PM wants to know, what type of backups do you have for cloud solutions?
And that's a great question, because it's like, okay, Office 365, all your stuff's backed up, it's high availability, but...
Well, it's, okay, so Office 365 is not a backup solution. Yes, you have access to if you delete something, you have access to that for 30 days. Beyond that, your data is your data. You have to protect it. So if you need something beyond that 30 days, then we typically will recommend some kind of backup solution. For a lot of customers, however, that 30 days is enough, because their policy is, if you delete something, we can recover it within 30 days. After that, it's gone. So again, it depends on the policy, how you're expecting your users to use it. But don't consider Office 365 as a backup solution. It is a cloud storage solution. So,
Agreed. Yeah, even though there are some tools included with some of the enterprise level plans in Office 365, things like litigation hold that will allow you to retain data even after users leave the company. Again, it's really not the best place. So if you've got a third-party storage solution, those all integrate perfectly with Office 365 to provide that backup situation.
So I mean, for example, like you don't have to have a backup in the sense that like your server could be lost in a flood.
No.
right.
But when it comes to either file losses through user error or something of the like,
Well, you've got time. So file losses,
Yeah.
user error, if they delete something by mistake, if they don't notice it within 30 days, then yeah, it's gone. But within 30 days, if they know that that file is missing, you can recover that
I
file.
guess my question though is, what are the cases then for backup stuff in Office 365 other than just I deleted this file? Are there reasons? I mean, obviously ransomware or viruses aren't as big of a concern. Is that a fair thing to say, or is it? And what are, because those are it would seem like the biggest drivers for a backup solution would be one of those things, or are there things that we haven't brought up yet? Is there a question?
Was there a question? Yes, those are some other considerations. So yes, so if those certainly for those reasons, that would be a consideration to have a backup. And so again, Microsoft's stance is it's your data, you protect it. So if you need something secondary to what's there, then we certainly recommend that you have that backup solution. Yes.
All right, Chelsea, I think we have time for a couple more.
Okay,
Go
great. Well, I have another one from, I keep butchering this person's name. Sorry, Spice Head. Misalk, Mysalc, whatever you want to say. This question is for Drew. Trying to better understand the partnership with a company like SHI, where does the issue support come from? SHI or Microsoft?
This comes up a lot too.
Yeah, so a lot of it really depends. There are a couple different programs that will have built-in support, like a cloud solution provider type program, but for the most part, the after the license purchase type support is going to be coming from Microsoft support, but a good partner is going to be helping you out with that too. So at SHI, we have a separate team that's dedicated to operations and support that can answer a lot of those questions. When it really comes to a Microsoft product breaking, though, that's typically where Microsoft will come in and do that support.
Well, and I think also to clarify, in the middle of a project with SHI, like you guys would be the front line as far as troubleshooting, and you guys would know when to reach out to Microsoft for an issue.
Yeah.
After you disengage, though, do you guys have support, or do you really just try to help the organizations like take ownership of responsibility of whatever solution that you've deployed for them?
Yeah, no, and it really comes down to the issue. So there's like support around licensing, there's support around products breaking, there's support around the actual migration work if we're doing any sort of professional services with the SHI team as well too. So most of the front end of that stuff is all done through and by SHI. When it comes to Microsoft support, that's typically after the project's completed, after the customers purchase the license, and it's something that Microsoft is actually responsible for as part of that too. So as part of selling that license, they'll do that. We can provide a CSP or cloud solutions provider program that has support built in, and that actually takes the onus off of Microsoft and puts it on the partner, SHI, to provide that support. But many of the traditional volume licensing methods, like the open, the MPSA, the enterprise agreement type methods, that's where support's done by Microsoft directly.
Okay, cool. Chelsea, we have time for one more?
One more. Okay, we'll make this one from Angie. Angie wants to know, I'm interested in the end user training feature offered by CloudClimb, parentheses SHI. Are different languages supported?
Great question. So there is one aspect. There is an end user training component. There's an end user portal where we actually partner with an end user portal, and there are multiple languages there. So certainly reach out, and I can I can hook up with them and answer that specific.
And just to kind of clarify further, because I thought this was really interesting, it's not just like a website, but it's like a constantly evolving product that you guys
Yes.
spend a lot of time curating, writing new content that's kind of adding to the site. So it's like something that's like, it's not just like a boom, here's a manual.
Right,
That
yes.
it is what you get. Like it's something that kind of continues to evolve as you know,
Office
things change.
365
Yeah.
evolves, yes, absolutely.
Cool. Chelsea, do one more. I think
You want to do one
got time.
more?
Yeah, that
Whoa,
was a quick
throwing
one.
me for a loop. Let me make this
My
one
bad.
a good one. All right, this one's going to be industry specific, so
Okay.
get ready. Hambone wants to know, I'm sure that HIPAA is a big concern for many companies. How do you provide comfort for a healthcare company in Office 365 in relation to compliance concerns, i.e. moving from on-prem Exchange to Exchange in the cloud?
Yes, that's a great question, and it's something we get all the time from our healthcare customers. And Microsoft is heavily invested in making sure that we're providing compliant solutions for our healthcare customers, as well as customers in the financial sector. So HIPAA is a big concern for a lot of our healthcare clients, and Microsoft will provide HIPAA BAA to all of our healthcare customers. Now, we won't actually sign any customers' documents, but we do provide that HIPAA BAA to give customers that sense of security that we are providing the compliance on our end to make sure that they're checking all the boxes and making sure that everything is compliant.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to be HIPAA compliant, and O365 meets our demands for that. So we have 6 health institutions, I believe.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a big deal, and we haven't had any issues with auditing or licensing for HIPAA.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for your questions. It's now time to shift gears to our final segment of the show. If you all have ever played the game Oregon Trail before, as many of you guys have in elementary school, or lately, if you wanted to brush up on your history, we got a fun game planned for you guys. So go ahead and saddle up, and we'll go ahead and get this game started. Now, we're going to be going on a journey across the country to the promised land of Office 365. We've got our family of pioneers here. Chris is our leader. So Chris, if you recall from Oregon Trail, the first decision you have to make is, are you going to be a banker, are you going to be a farmer, or are you going to be a carpenter? So in our case, you get to decide, are we a financial institution, are we a agricultural institution, or are we a manufacturing institution?
Let's go with manufacturing.
Manufacturing. All right. So sounds good. So the next step in Office Trail, or in Oregon Trail, is to stop at the store. We're going to pack up some supplies. We have a set budget that we got to divide between oxen, axles, clothing, and ammunition for the hunting. And it's always a big decision when you're playing Oregon Trail, how you're going to split that up. For Office 365 organization, it's really more about it's about money, but it's also about time, and especially when it comes to actually planning the path that you're going to get there. So my first question is, between the planning, the actual migration, the user and IT preparedness, and the post-migration support, how would you guys break down 1,000 hypothetical time units or dollars? What do you guys feel like people should be prioritizing, and where do you think we should be putting most of our dollars?
I think the planning and the education, both for the IT and for the end user, getting them up to speed on what the product is and how to use it, as well as planning for the migration. Those are probably the 2 biggest areas that you should focus on.
Do you guys agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if we had to split up $1,000 of time units, what would that breakup be? Is planning $40? Is it 30? Is it 50 or 60?
30, 35.
30,
Yeah.
35.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how much toward, you said user training and
Yeah.
extra training. What's that? Another 30, 35?
I would say that's another 30.
Yeah.
That's another 30. All right, so we've got, say, 35 for planning. We've got 30 for training. So that leaves about 35 left for the migration itself and post-migration support. So how do you split that up, the remaining 35?
Hire SHI to do the migration for you.
Yeah.
Takes care of that
For $20.
for 20.
$20 is how much it costs. Cool. Good to know. Sold. Chris, what do you think?
It's if you're a small shop, you can probably get away with doing it yourself. If you're a larger shop, definitely get help. it on paper it may look easy, but it's not. And having people who have done it before, people who know what to expect, will help you out immensely in the long term.
Okay. All right. So now our wagons are hitched. We got our supplies loaded in. Our family of pioneers is ready to go. And sure enough, first thing into the journey was it. Do we have a broken axle? I think it might be a broken axle. Oh, the oxen was injured. And oxen was injured, guys. So, as far as a migration or a planning or a project in general getting derailed and oxen getting injured, what might that actually look like? Chris, you said you ran into a couple oxen getting injured in your Office 365 migration.
Yeah, because we didn't have the backup for that, and so we didn't plan ahead for it. And when it happens, it could be one user, it could be 50 users that basically don't have email for a day or 2 days.
Yeah.
Which, everyone's like, oh, I wish I didn't have to worry about email for a day or two, but
I would love to. Can I sign up for that?
when it does happen, it's a bad thing.
How can we do that?
Yeah. What about you guys? How are ways that oxen can get injured?
Well, starting off with the wrong licenses can certainly be a problem
Yeah.
for customers. That's one of the things that I try to do is make sure that customers start off their journey with the right licenses. There's lots of options for Office 365. You want to make sure you're taking the right products with you when you go, and definitely hooking up with a wagon train rather than going it on your own, right? You want to make sure you've got folks with you that have been down that road before and can help you whenever you have a sick oxen.
Yeah, and I'd say it's really tempting to bite off more than you can chew at the beginning, so you buy an entire suite of Office 365 products and try and migrate everything at once. It really all does come back to the planning phases of everything and making sure you have kind of a staged approach, that you've planned it all out.
All right. And speaking of licenses, I believe we were setting up camp in the middle of the night. All of a sudden, a thief stole all of our licenses. Those darn license thieves, always out on the trail. And I think, obviously Scott brings up a good point. You want to make sure you have the best understanding of your licensing situation going in, but either Scott or Drew or Audrey, do licensing issues ever happen in the middle of it? Other than kind of, I guess, understanding that you don't have the right ones, but maybe Drew, you've got some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to purchase Office 365 licenses, and to manage those is a completely separate portal as well, too. So there's a learning curve that's associated with it. You have to make sure that if you're buying them under separate agreements or with a credit card direct through Microsoft, that everything's tied to the same tenant. You also have customers who need separate tenants if they're a government contractor, different things that they want to make sure to separate those end users as well. So making sure that that's all aligned and that you, again, have a plan going into that, because it can get a little bit complicated. Adding users looks a little bit different too, depending on the agreement that you're under as well. So making sure that you have that strategy, and again, working with that partner to make sure that you understand exactly what needs to be done at what phase with the licenses.
Yeah. And just speaking of tenants, so tying it to the right licenses, but often customers they'll be ready to get their tenant set up, and lo and behold, they log in and their tenant name is used because somebody else in the organization started a trial of Office 365 a year ago. Nobody knew about it. So kind of getting some of those things in place prior is good.
Okay, all right, and now it comes to the final stage of our journey. As you guys know, in Oregon Trail, it all comes down to crossing that river. Everyone's got to cross that river at some point. And for us, crossing that river is actually bringing our users across that river into Office 365 land. And so in Oregon Trail, you had the choice. Do you try to cross the river yourself on foot? Do you hitch up your wagon onto a raft and try to navigate down? Or do you hire a guide to get you there? So for us, Chris, did you say we're manufacturing? Do we take all of our users across the river at once? Do we try to navigate the river and kind of take them all in a staged approach? Or do we hire a guide to take us there?
Well, I think the first thing you do is hire a guide. And then from our perspective, looking back on it, I think we try to get everyone across at once.
Get everyone across
with
at
a
once.
guide.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you guys think? So hiring the guide, I feel like you guys are going to all be advocates for that. But the staged approach, waterfall, what have you, versus Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
Any quick tips on or things that people should be considering?
I think it depends on the workload. So with Exchange, I think it makes sense to kind of get your plan, maybe have IT pilot that initially, and then kind of get everybody over. But then after that, beyond the Exchange part, a stage approach typically helps, because then you can figure out, as we talked about before, those use cases and kind of break down some of those barriers. So.
All right, cool. Well, we successfully navigated the river. Everyone is safe and sound. Are we in Office 365 land? Did we all make it safe there? Oh, dang it, I died of dysentery. Darn it. All right, well, we had 4 surviving members of our party. Thank you guys for playing along with Office 365 Trail. We're starting to run out of time, and I wanted to make sure that you guys had an opportunity to share any final thoughts or advice with the crowd. So Chris, we'll start with you. For folks that might be in a similar situation as you were before migration, what advice do you have for them?
Research. Do your research. Do a lot of research. Look at all the issues, and if possible, if you have the budget for it, get third-party help, especially if you're a larger organization. It really helps to have an expert on hand to help you point out those issues that might pop up. And so that would have helped us a lot.
Audrey, what takeaways would you like folks watching?
I would say understand your use case scenarios, understand the pain points and what you're trying to do from a business initiative, and how Office 365 can help to address those issues.
Drew?
Yeah, I'd say to Chris's point, the partnership is probably the most important part of that too. So the idea is customers only do this probably once unless you're switching companies. Partners like SHI have done this hundreds and thousands of times with customers. So we know the pitfalls to avoid and what to look out for there, and have technical training around the licensing and around the products themselves too. So we're here to help for you guys.
All right, cool. And Scott?
Yep. A lot of customers that we talk to are kind of apprehensive about making that journey to the cloud. And what I say is, don't be scared. You know, there's lots of benefits to moving to the cloud. And if you've got a good plan in place and you've prepared for it, and particularly if you've got a good guide along that journey, it's going to be a much smoother path for you. And it's going to, once you finally get to the cloud, you'll have a lot fewer issues because you've had that expertise guide you along the way. So don't be scared.
All right, very cool. Well, guys, it is the time everyone has been waiting for. Time to find who's walking away with some prizes. So let's head on back over to Chelsea and find out who is going home with some cool stuff. Chelsea.
First things first, Double D and the folks in chat have called for a moment of silence for Justin.
Oh, thank you.
Who was
So nice to know
lost
I'll be remembered.
on the great office trails. He was a great friend, a great host. He will be missed. And now for some fun stuff. Prizes! Okay, we've got tons of winners today. Well, not tons, we've got 4 winners. The first 3 are gonna be getting these SHI Microsoft cups, tumblers, insulated coffee delivery systems. These are going out to the following Spice Heads. This name, which I really don't know how to say very well, so I'm gonna make it up, I'm gonna say it different every time. It's going out to me, Sa, Elsie. Congratulations, you're one of the winners. Sean and Angie.
All right.
Yay. Misal.
How do you spell it?
Misalc.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like it's just like a word jumble. But you are a winner, so congratulations. And then our grand prize, which is going out to one very lucky attendee of today's show. That is a Nintendo NES, and that is going out to, drumroll please.
All right.
Boom, boom, boom. You were on fire with those questions today, and you're still here, so you're getting the Nintendo NES. Good job. So those are all of our winners today. If I did announce you as one of our winners, please be sure to email us your mailing address at ontheair@spiceworks.com. I'll put that email address up and the winners list in chat momentarily. But I did want to give a quick thank you to everyone that tuned in for Chelsea Cam, hung out in chat, and submitted some great questions today. Thank you, thank you, thank you, as always. Justin?
All right, congratulations, guys. And thanks for hanging out with us and asking all those great questions. I want to say thanks again to our panel, Chris, Audrey, Drew, and Scott. We'd love to have you guys back sometime real soon. It's been a lot of fun. Yep. Thanks for playing along with Oregon Trail Office 365 Trail.
Sorry you died.
Huh?
Sorry you
Yeah, I know. But I'm like Kenny from South Park, though, so I'll be back next week. So. We'll be back, speaking of next week, when I'm back alive. Next week, we got a show about network security and how to protect your network from the most dangerous threat, people inside your network. So make sure to check out, we've got a podcast that's going to be dropping on Friday. So make sure to check that out. And for that episode information and all things on the air, make sure to go to community.spiceworks.com/on-the-air. Until next time, guys, stay safe, keep it spicy, hug your Office 365 clouds and your users, and we'll see you guys back here next time. Bye, everybody.